Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Leadership Live with JJ Hardy and me, Chris Pienkowski. JJ, how you doing today?
Life is good. I can't complain, man. I don't have class tonight, like I told you earlier, and so I know that I have after work is done today. Nothing but relaxation time.
Awesome. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, yes, sir.
Yes,
How are you?
I'm good. Got some work to do around the house this weekend. We used to have a trampoline, and we are now turning that into what my kids are calling a conversation pit. So it's so the trampoline was kind of sunk into the ground and surrounded by stones, and it was all like sand underneath. So we're actually putting pavers down this weekend, and it's 20 yards away from the pool. So that's where we're going to put the fire pit and chairs, and it's a place for them to hang out with their buddies and, do what they do as teenage boys.
Enough said.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm excited about today's chat. What are we talking about today?
Me too. So today we are talking about performance reviews.
Performance reviews.
Performance reviews is something that is critical. It's something that a lot of people get wrong, to be honest. There are a lot of misconceptions around performance reviews. So, what are your thoughts, man? Let's jump right into this because I think this is a topic that a lot of people can get some really good learning lessons from.
Yeah, so this is like the systematic part to communicating consistently and often. And, this is where a lot of leaders fail, where they might talk to their people quite often, but people are out working, not really understanding where they stand.
Yes.
So this is where you schedule intentional time, whether it's monthly, quarterly, every 6 months, whatever the case may be, to make sure that you are sitting your subordinates down. And that we can talk about the opposite end when it comes to performance reviews as well. But this is from the top down, from you to your employees. This is where you sit them down and say, this is what's going right with what you're doing. This is what's going wrong, in my opinion. This is where I feel like as a group, the direction we're going, and also asking that crucial question: what can I do better? And by the way, let's talk about everything that I just got done saying.
Yep. And that is a very typical structure.
There's one thing that I know you're going to mention, though, that I didn't mention.
Let's see if we're on the same wavelength here. So the one thing that I think a lot of companies get wrong is the fact that they save performance reviews to do annually. And they absolutely need to be done at least on a quarterly basis. And one of the things that I always like to incorporate in my performance reviews is planning for the next quarter. So we're going to review everything that's happened over these past 90 days. And now, what are our goals going forward? I also like to say that if you're in communication with your subordinate leaders throughout the quarter, then number one, none of their performance should be a surprise when they walk into that room. And you should be addressing things like if things aren't going well throughout the quarter, you don't just keep a notepad of all the things that Joe Snuffy did over the past 90 days. Now I'm going to drop this bomb on him during the performance review. You address it as it happens, and then the performance review becomes more of a performance planning session. We're not harping on these things that we've already talked about. We've already corrected them. We're looking forward and we're saying, okay, for the next quarter, these are your goals, and this is how they roll up to the strategic goals of the organization. So you've got to tie them together. And it has to be at least every 90 days as far as I'm concerned. And
yes,
I think too, there's a psychological aspect of talking about performance planning versus performance review. When people hear review, they're like, oh man, we're going to review all the shit that I didn't do well. Now, let's take a positive spin. We're looking in the future. Let's focus on planning for our performance, because if you're doing it right, you've already addressed it. You've already done the review part.
Yeah.
Did I hit what you thought I was going to hit?
More or less. The one thing that I think you missed, though, because I was going to say that it should be a planning session to move forward with certain actionable things that that person can do to improve. Yep. And the one thing that I think you missed, though, because you did say that, is that this is a coaching session, in my opinion.
Yes.
So this is the opportunity to really help somebody in their development, because you don't just go in there with cookie cutter making plans for them. You discuss, this is what our mission is for the next quarter. And, I think we should talk about what your personal goals are going to be to move forward with that. And so that's the one component that wasn't mentioned that I was hoping would be, but you did say it, but you didn't say it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I don't know why I blanked on that, because that is like, when you're taking that time every quarter, whether it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and you're planning for the future, it should include, you shouldn't gloss over what happened in the previous quarter. That should be incorporated into the next quarter's development plan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yes, it is a coaching session, as well as a planning session.
Yes.
I also like to ask for feedback from people, like, hey, how am I doing as your leader? What resources can I be giving you? How can I be showing up in a more effective way to empower you to be the best that you can be?
That's important.
That's also, it's got to be a two-way street.
Yeah. And actually, typically I try to do that in the beginning, because I want them to think that it's an open conversation. So if you're vulnerable at first, letting them know that you want their feedback before you go into them, because if you make it about them first, even though you may say the things they've done well first, all they're going to hear is the things that you think they can use improvement. However, if you start off with asking for their feedback,
right,
I think that it's very valuable, because they're automatically going to go to, oh, this isn't just about me. We're both here trying to help each other.
That's
so
right.
That's important. Now, aside from those individual sessions, I agree with you. Monthly or quarterly, for those reviews, in the military, we called them counseling. It was a quarter counseling session. And then you have your annual evaluation report. I think it's an extremely good model to do it that way, because you have data and you have what actionable steps that these people held themselves accountable for during each evaluation period that they did and didn't do. And, that way, when there's time for an evaluation, they basically set themselves up, whether it was good, bad, right, or wrong. And I hate to say it that way, but sometimes people aren't always an extremely high achiever. And when you do it that way, it's actual data based off of the goals that they set for themselves that you're using as a catalyst to generate that evaluation report at the year's end.
Agreed. And one of the reasons that I'd like it to be done on a quarterly basis is because, as an organization, you should be setting quarterly goals that all roll up to the annual goal. So you're keeping your people in lockstep with what's going on with the company. So if you're monitoring progress, right? If you're measuring and managing along the way, then you know whether you're on track or off track of hitting those quarterly goals. And then it's just a reset every 90 days. All right, new set of goals, same annual goal. But that's why I really advocate for that quarterly cadence because it just ties in with the rest of the planning around the organization when it's being done right.
You're right. It does. And let me specify. So I think that depending on how high performing your frontline employees are, some people might need a monthly engagement or a biweekly engagement to get themselves where they need to be, to the point where you can go kind of farther and farther and farther apart. Everyone is at a different place in their development.
Yes.
Some people need to have their hand held, which is okay. We need everybody in the workplace. We can't just have the high performers.
Right.
But some people need to just be to just have a conversation, and for you to step back and just let them do what they do, because they're already doing a fantastic job. Don't forget about them. That's also, you know, I've noticed on the APA website, some of these high performers, they have such anxiety because their people don't communicate with them about how well they are doing.
Yeah.
So it tends to result in, fear of failure and all of those other things, because at the end of the day, if you're high performing, then that means that you're holding other people probably to a standard,
Yeah.
and you're holding yourself to a standard. And if you don't know how you're being seen from a senior standpoint, then you're just constantly in a state of WTF. And
Yeah.
it's important to make sure that you're engaging with them, maybe not in a formal evaluation standpoint, but this is where the communicating consistently and often comes in.
That's a really good point. I want to hang out here for a second regarding the high performers, because it's very easy for a leader to not engage so deeply with those high performers because they've got it. And the leader knows, like, all right, they're hitting their numbers, they know what's expected of them. They're driving accountability of other people just to try to keep up with them. But it's super important as a leader to take the time to talk with your high performing direct reports, to number one, let them know that they're doing an awesome job. Who doesn't like to get that pat on the back every now and then? A lot of high performers will come across as, you know what? I'm good. Like I don't need the constant
It's a facade.
positive reinforcement, but we all do. I don't care how well of a performer you are. When you hear it from your seniors, what a good job you're doing, it only stokes the fire. It makes you perform even higher. So don't overlook your high performers. And also, you also want to make sure that they're not burning themselves out. That's
Or
another touch point for your high performers, is like, yeah, these people are running at 100 miles an hour all day, every day. So just having that conversation of, what resources do you need? How can I be helpful to you? How close are you letting your wings get to the sun and not catching on fire? Like, so making sure that, in the same way you want to bring up those folks that are struggling, you want to make sure that your high performers aren't burning out. So don't neglect your touch bases with your high performers, because that could be catastrophic as well.
Me and some of my battle buddies, when I was growing up through the ranks in the military, the ones that really, really cared and they did the hard work all the time and did everything that was asked of them, we all had conversations around this exact subject. There's another thing that you got to consider too, and that's that you, as the direct supervisor of that high performer, you don't want to just pile more and more and more and more work on their shoulders.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll get it done, but what's the cost here? You got to remember that this is still a person. So the more weight you throw on their back, the more they're going to be crippled at some point. And so making sure that you're not the one who's burning them out is also another thing to consider. That's why these touch points are important, because you're having conversations around what's going right, what's going wrong, and what you can do better as a leader to support that person.
That's a really good point. I I just had a conversation recently with somebody who was very frustrated, high performer, and this guy said, you know, I'm the person who just does what needs to be done. And what is happening is that things are getting piled onto me that are way outside of my area of expertise. And it's not that I don't want to grow, but we have other people in the organization who I'm picking up the slack because I'm the guy who gets things done and just shit gets piled on me.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to get frustrated about it. So that's the other thing. When you've got these high performers, they're it's a delicate balance of how much can I put on their shoulders before they start to snap. Like you've got to temper them from burning themselves out. And you as a leader have to know when to say enough is enough. This this person's working 100 hours a week and it's because they don't complain. It's because they're a high performer. It's because they believe in our mission and everything else. But you're doing yourself a disservice as a leader by continuing to pile on to those people.
You know, there is a saying that I've always held true to, and that is, and it works on so many different levels, but documentation beats conversation every 100% of the time.
Mhm.
And, you know, we fail things as people. That's just, it's a natural thing that happens.
Right.
And sometimes we fail others. If we don't take note of something, then there's a good chance that it's just going to go away. And so with all of the people that you have under your charge, that's why these performance reviews are important. When you walk up to somebody and you have a conversation with them one-on-one about how their day is, what's going right and what's going wrong, and then you walk away and you have that same conversation with somebody else, because this is what you're trying to do to make sure everyone's comfortable with you. But that's all you do, and you don't take the opportunity to do these performance reviews. These low performers are going to get forgotten, and these high performers are going to be hammered on a regular basis. And I've seen it happen a million times. Now, these performance reviews, if you have these quarterly or monthly or every 6-month conversations with somebody, and you have that documentation to look at, and they come back to you and say, I'm struggling, I don't know what's happening right now, but that last quarter they said that there's a lot of work being piled on me, and they opened up to you, or maybe they didn't, and you notice their performance is dropping a little bit. Now, this is a trigger. So it'll trigger memories of these conversations that you're having with this person in passing that you, by the way, probably did forget to a certain level. And it holds you accountable because you have black and white showing that their performance is dropping, even though that is not typical for that person.
Yeah.
And so it also, documentation is important. You don't just do it as a formality. You do it to hold yourself accountable for your people.
See, and that's another thing that I think a lot of people get wrong is they think that documentation is number one, like a CYA type of thing.
Yep.
And they see documenting things as part of the sequence of a negative effect. Like, all right, I've got to document this because if I've got to go to HR, I need a paper trail. And that
It's
is
valid.
true.
It's valid. Yeah. But that's not the only reason why you do it.
Right. As a leader, documenting those conversations and kind of keeping a running file on your direct reports, even if it's just one Word document, that you have one Word document for each of your direct reports, and you're documenting, these conversations in passing, things that you're noticing. We just had we just went through the numbers last week and something was off. This was the solution. Our memories, as much as we like to think they're a steel trap, they're not.
No.
From a leadership standpoint, that becomes a tool that you can use to reference and look back on and say, man, Joe Snuffy's just been like dragging ass. Let me go, oh, okay, now I see what's going on with Joe, and I need to go address that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can, if we get to the point where we're looking at ourselves as infallible, that's a problem, because we always have areas that can be improved in. And let's just be honest. I've seen so many organizations that I've been a part of start to drop because they don't pay attention.
Mhm.
And it's there's fault there, but there's not fault there. Sometimes things just start moving a lot faster, and if when you notice that's happening, you got to take a step back and have conversations with your team, or maybe bring in somebody outside of your team and say, I have no idea what's going on here. We are fallible.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the process. And if you start getting so arrogant and cocky, and you let that damn ego that we keep on talking about beat you in the ass, then pardon my language, I'm sorry. But when you let that ego take over, well, now that's when the really, really bad mistake starts happening. And if you work in a warehouse or in an area with a lot of moving parts, people can get hurt.
Mhm.
Projects can start to fail, and things really start to just, I don't know, they start to get worse over time. And you got to be really, really careful with that.
So true. And one of the things that I will often remind leaders of is you're keeping an eye on your financial resources. You're keeping an eye on your physical resources, your building, your property, whatever. There's a reason that it's called human resources. It is probably your most valuable resource are your people, because without them, you're not getting that work done. But that often does go, it becomes the like the redheaded stepchild.
It does.
And people get focused on the numbers and the rent for our new building or whatever. The human resources are so important. You can't take your eye off of them.
And we're not talking about the human resources section. We're talking about the people doing the doggone work.
Right. The actual humans.
Actual humans. A
Yeah.
business is nothing more than a group of people coming together to do a job. And I keep on mentioning that, but people still miss it.
Yeah.
Now, that's where it's important, not just for evaluations and performance reviews, but that's where it's important to create this culture of servant leadership. This culture where everybody is there to help everybody else out. You don't hear words like, that's not my job, or I'm not going to do that because I'm too busy, or whatever the case may be. I mean, people should always be there to serve. And when that happens, you create a collaborative work environment. And the reason it's a culture, because people don't think twice when it comes time to help somebody. They just do it.
Yes.
And in order to do that, as the leader, whether you're the CEO or you're the down trace manager, it doesn't matter. You can set a culture on your team. You can set a culture on your teams, or you can set a culture in a whole business. And it doesn't matter what level you are, you have that level of influence. So don't think for a second that your outside people are going to affect the way that your team feels when they're at work if you're not making this an intentional process.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, so JJ, real quick, we've got like 6 minutes left for today.
Yep.
But what are the things that people absolutely should be having in their performance reviews, or if you're going to call it a performance planning session, it's six in one, half dozen in the other. But what are the absolute musts that people often overlook, but they really shouldn't be, in your opinion?
Yeah. So should have, what is going right with the section and with that employee, what is going wrong in the section and with that employee. It needs to have, it needs to say, what am I doing right and wrong as a boss, and how can I support you and the rest of the team better? And then go over the mission and the vision for the next quarter for the company, and just discuss how that person can affect change in that process and help them create a performance plan.
Yep. And I'm going to piggyback onto that and say that once you've had that discussion during the quarterly meeting, it now comes down to collaborating with that person and saying, okay, now we understand what our goals are. So what's your plan to execute?
Mhm.
It's empowering them to come up with a plan of how they're going to achieve the goal. And then also it's setting the objective goals and the milestones along the way. Because I see this so often and I want to strangle people. But they set these subjective goals like, I just want to grow sales this quarter. Oh, awesome. What's that mean? Bring in an extra dollar than we did last quarter? Or are we growing sales by a percentage or by a certain dollar amount? So they can't be vague. When you're setting these goals for your people quarterly, and then you're measuring them along the way, it helps them know if they're on track or off track of achieving that goal. If you do a quarterly performance review and someone walks out of your office and they don't have objective measurements that they know, once I hit this, I have achieved this goal, then you've done it wrong.
Yep.
And if they walk out of that office and they're like, man, Chris just jammed this plan down my throat that he wants me to achieve in the next quarter, you've done it wrong. It should be they walk out of your office and they know these are the objectives. This is the plan that I, the employee, came up with, got the blessing from my boss, and now I'm going to go execute.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. And you know what? If you have an entire team of employees that have similar objectives, that's actually fuel to create a meeting with all of your team and say, everyone has the same goal. Let's figure out how to make this happen.
Yes.
That's happened before too. But that can be another topic. But you just sparked that in my mind. By the way, I was internally laughing inside because I had a vision of Chris P strangling one of his employees. That's just how my mind works. I don't know why I went there.
You know, there have been times that I've been like on site with clients and I'm hearing them say things and I've got to stop myself from saying, so you know what, that I trained jujitsu. Let me show you this new move. And I'm just going to put you to sleep in the conference room and carry on.
or doing one that lasts even longer and saying, hey, look, dummy, this is how it's supposed to go. Yeah. Both of those things are so wrong, and I could use a few analogies, but they're probably not appropriate, so I won't. But yeah, man, so this was a great talk. I think that, you know, the idea of a performance review, especially for smaller and medium-sized companies, it's lost. They're just lost in the work.
Yeah.
But I think if this is one thing that they adopt, communication and everything will improve as a result. And you know, there might not be an immediate change in the way the operations improve, but over time there will be trust and everything else that improves as a result of this and the regular communication that we regularly talk about. But over time, everything will get better. If you take regular steps to improve things and then tell people where they stand, things will get better.
That's the key. Consistency is the key. And I would encourage, I mean, if you're a small company, you should absolutely be doing this. I mean, you know, you and I sit down and do quarterly planning with each other.
We do.
Right? So
we do.
if you're a business of one, you're a solopreneur, find someone else that's in a similar position and have that meeting with them. Number one, that's an accountability piece. But number two, you're not operating in a silo and you're able to collaborate and, you know, work through scenarios with someone else.
Yeah. In a small business, especially, that person can be a collaborator, not just an employee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
When you're small, I think you're just constantly grabbing at lifelines anyway.
Right.
Don't just dismiss the value of another person in your organization.
That's right.
Yep.
Uh, JJ, this has been an awesome conversation. I mean, they all are, but performance reviews are something that, when they're done right, so many of the other topics that we've talked about start to fall into place.
Yep.
It's a great tool for engagement and for ongoing development of employees. So I can't believe that we've waited this long to talk about performance reviews.
Well, it brings a lot of things together, though. I mean,
It does.
we've talked about a lot of really good topics, and one of the most recent ones was communication, and so this kind of ties some things together, and it was a good time to talk about it. So I in a way, I'm kind of glad we waited to this point to talk about it.
There's a reason for everything, right?
Yes, sir.
Any parting thoughts before we wrap it up for today?
Communicate consistently and often, and let people know where they stand. That's it.
Yep. And I will just reiterate that your performance reviews or performance planning sessions should not be a surprise to anyone in the room.
Nope.
Address issues as they come up. Don't just keep a running list and then drop a bomb on somebody.
No, yeah,
That is going to be detrimental. Yeah,
that person's gonna quit.
they are. Because the old saying, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses.
They quit. Yeah, they quit their managers for sure. That's right.
Yep. So, all right, JJ, once again, awesome conversation with this week's Leadership Live. And everybody, thank you for joining us. If you got something out of today's session, please like it. Please share it. Please tell other people about it so that they can go and watch it on the replay. If you've got questions, drop them into the social media channels. JJ and I will both be keeping an eye out and interacting with you. We're happy to answer your questions. And until next time, have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.